Sometimes, the people who walk into your life with the most intensity are the very ones the universe will later take away. And no matter how much it hurts, how much it doesn't make sense, there's a deeper reason for it. One that only reveals itself in silence, in solitude, and with time. Think back to someone who meant everything to you, a friend, a lover, maybe even a mentor, someone who seemed to understand your soul before you fully understood it yourself. In the beginning, it felt like alignment. You didn't meet them, you recognized them. The laughter flowed easily, the conversations deep and effortless. It was as if your paths were carved to meet, and for a moment you believed they were part of your story for good. But then, without a clear warning, something shifted. Maybe they drifted away slowly in unanswered messages and growing silences. Maybe they left abruptly, like a door slamming shut in the middle of a storm. Or maybe they stayed physically close but emotionally vanished, and you could feel it, the distance, the disconnect, the unspoken goodbye. In those moments, the mind begs for clarity. What did I do wrong? Why now? Why them? You retrace steps, overanalyze words, and try to fix what maybe was never yours to hold on to. But here's the truth, most people won't tell you. Some souls enter your life not to stay, but to stir something, to awaken a sleeping part of you, to push you toward the version of yourself you were meant to become. Carl Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist, spoke about this in ways deeper than mere psychology. He believed that every relationship, especially the intense ones, reflects an internal need, a call from within. He said, until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate. The people we attract are often mirrors, not of who we are, but of what we need to see. Sometimes, the universe places someone in your path to ignite healing in a part of you you've been ignoring. That passionate lover who left might have mirrored your abandonment wounds, forcing you to finally face them. That best friend who betrayed you could have been the lesson in self-respect you never knew you needed. And that sudden heartbreak? It may have been a sacred interruption, the kind that clears the path for something far greater, even if it doesn't feel like it now. In many spiritual traditions, it's believed that souls make agreements before they come into this life, that we meet certain people, not by chance, but by design. These are called soul contracts. Some are meant to last a lifetime, others only long enough to shift your direction. And it's hard to accept because we are taught to value permanence. We romanticize forever. We believe that love, if it's real, should never end. But what if the deepest love is the one that comes to break you so that you can finally meet yourself? There's a Japanese concept called kintsugi, the art of repairing broken pottery with gold. Instead of hiding the cracks, they are highlighted, made more beautiful. The object becomes more valuable because it was broken. People are like that too. Sometimes the ones who break you don't ruin you, they refine you. They leave you shattered not to destroy you, but to reveal where your gold lives. Have you ever noticed how pain clarifies things? How, in the aftermath of losing someone, your values shift? The things you used to tolerate suddenly feel unbearable. You start saying no more. You stop shrinking to fit. That is the transformation these temporary connections bring. They are catalysts, fire starters, and fire, while destructive, also purifies. We often think healing is about letting go of the person, but it's deeper than that. It's about letting go of the version of yourself that was clinging to them, the part of you that believed you were only whole with them, the part that ignored red flags for the sake of comfort, the part that settled, compromised, or overgave. When they leave, that version of you doesn't survive, and that's the gift. The universe doesn't just take people away, it clears space. And it's not always a punishment. Sometimes it's protection, sometimes it's preparation. What you saw as an ending might have been a realignment, a divine redirection. And it's strange how, after a while, when the fog of heartbreak lifts, you begin to see it. The subtle signs that this person wasn't truly aligned with your path. The tiny ways you were shrinking, adjusting, compromising too much. but you couldn't see it while you were inside it. Love makes us blind to imbalance. It's only in the distance that clarity settles in. You begin to remember who you were before them. Or more importantly, you begin to become who you were meant to be because of them. And that's the paradox of the universe. It gives you what you think you need to find what you truly need. It sends people who feel like home, only to remind you that your real home is within yourself. So when the universe removes someone from your life, it's not cruelty, it's choreography. There are lessons that only loss can teach. There are awakenings that only silence can spark, and sometimes it's in the absence of someone that your presence finally comes alive. The wound becomes the womb. The end becomes the entrance. And what once felt like breaking now begins to feel like becoming. There is a moment, after the storm of heartbreak, after the pleading prayers for someone to stay, after the silence becomes too loud to ignore, when you feel something shift. It's not peace, not yet. It's not closure either. It's detachment, quiet, unfamiliar, and strange. Not indifference, but a beginning, like a wound scabbing over for the first time. The pain is still there, but it no longer controls you. Detachment doesn't arrive with fireworks. It slips in during the moments you no longer wait for their name to appear on your screen. It's in the breath you finally take without feeling like it might break you. It's the moment you begin to reclaim the spaces where their presence used to echo. And while it feels foreign at first, detachment is one of the most powerful forms of healing you'll ever experience. We're conditioned to believe that letting go is synonymous with failure, that if a relationship ends, it means something went wrong. But what if it means something finally went right? What if detachment is not about giving up on someone, but about choosing yourself in places you used to abandon yourself for them? To detach is to acknowledge that loving someone doesn't always mean keeping them close. It means loving yourself enough to walk away when the connection starts costing your peace. It means recognizing when your soul no longer feels safe in someone else's presence, no matter how much history exists. This is not easy, especially for those who love deeply, who give completely, who stay long after the warmth has faded. Empaths, romantics, survivors. They often hold on not because they don't see the cracks, but because they believe in the beauty of mending things. They believe love can heal all. But here's the hard truth. Sometimes love isn't the cure. Sometimes it's the lesson. In psychology, especially in trauma-informed practices, there's a concept called fawn response. It's one of the lesser-known survival responses, alongside fight, flight, and freeze. Fawning is when you over-please, over-apologize, over-give to keep someone in your life, not because it's love, but because it's survival. Because somewhere you learned that being too much or asking for your needs would push people away. So you shrink, you silence, you stay. Detachment interrupts that cycle. It tells your nervous system, you don't have to earn love by disappearing. It reclaims your worth, not as something someone else gives you, but as something that was always yours. But how do you know it's time to detach? How do you know when love has turned into self-sacrifice? It's in the subtle moments, when your laughter starts to feel hollow around them, when your dreams start shrinking so their ego won't feel threatened, when you start hiding parts of yourself, your joy, your truth, your brilliance, because shining too brightly might make them leave. That's not love, that's survival dressed in affection. Detachment becomes necessary when staying costs your identity, and it's important to understand detachment isn't bitterness. It's not about revenge or apathy. True detachment is rooted in clarity. It's when you no longer chase someone to convince them of your value. It's when you stop rewriting your boundaries just to make them comfortable. It's the art of choosing peace over chaos, not because you stopped caring, but because you finally started caring about you. In Buddhist philosophy, detachment doesn't mean you stop loving. It means you love without clinging, without trying to possess, without building your sense of self around another person's presence. There's a quote often attributed to Buddha, "You only lose what you cling to." And it's true. The tighter you grip something not meant for you, the more you bleed. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is to stop trying to save what's already dying. Take the lotus flower. It's often seen as a symbol of spiritual awakening, but do you know where it grows? In mud. Thick, dark, unclean mud. The lotus only blooms because it rises through the filth. In the same way, detachment isn't about avoiding pain, it's about rising through it. It's about honoring the grief, but choosing not to build a home inside of it. There's an ancient African proverb that says, "When there is no enemy within, the enemy outside can do you no harm." Detachment helps silence the enemy within, the voice that says you're not enough without them, that your value depends on their attention, that your worth is conditional. That voice becomes quieter when you begin choosing silence over desperation, solitude over begging, boundaries over begging. But what about the memories? The places still haunted by their name, the song that still aches. Healing doesn't mean forgetting. You don't have to erase the past to be free from it. What detachment does is remove the emotional grip that memory has on you. You can remember without relapsing. You can reflect without reopening. You can carry the love without carrying the wound. Detachment gives you back your narrative. It lets you write a story where you're no longer just someone's side character, where your healing is not dependent on their return, where closure doesn't come from a final conversation, but from a quiet decision to move forward even without one. And slowly, as the days pass, you begin to feel something new. The weight lifts. The nights become gentler. You start smiling, not because they texted back, but because you saw something beautiful and you thought of yourself. You become proud, not because you fixed the relationship, but because you fixed the parts of you that tolerated what you never deserved. Detachment clears space, and life always fills space, with peace, with purpose, with the kind of people who don't make love feel like a performance or pain feel like a price tag. And without realizing it, you begin to crave solitude, not because you're broken, but because you've tasted your own company and found it delicious. You no longer search for someone to complete you, because you know now you were never incomplete. Some losses feel like accidents, sudden, cruel, unfair, like the universe made a mistake, like someone was ripped from your life before the story had time to unfold. But what if that pain, that very absence, was orchestrated, not as punishment, but as alignment? You see, when we experience loss, especially the kind that leaves us breathless and raw, our minds go to war with reality. Why now? Why them? What did I do? But underneath all those questions is a quieter possibility. What if this happened not to me, but for me? Carl Jung introduced the concept of synchronicity to explain the strange, meaningful coincidences that seem to follow us like breadcrumbs from the divine. It's that feeling you get when you think about someone you haven't seen in years, and they call. Or when a book falls off a shelf and its message answers the very question your soul has been asking in silence. These aren't random. Jung called them a causal connecting principles, events linked not by cause but by meaning. So what does synchronicity have to do with someone leaving your life? Everything. When someone exits your life, especially abruptly or painfully, it often coincides with something else shifting. A door closing so another can open, a career move, a deep spiritual awakening, a confrontation with your own truth. At first, it feels like chaos, but slowly patterns begin to emerge, a deeper rhythm, a design. You realize that had they stayed, you wouldn't have changed. You would have stayed small, comfortable, maybe even stuck. Think about this. How many times in your life did something go wrong, only for it to lead you somewhere so much better than what you were asking for? There was once a woman who had been in a 7-year relationship, safe, steady, and slowly draining her spirit. She wouldn't leave, though. Fear of being alone had its grip around her spine. Then one day he left. No warning, no fight, just gone. She shattered. But in that collapse, she did something she had always postponed. She applied to a study abroad art program in Florence. Alone, terrified, heartbroken, she went. A year later, she had opened a gallery, met someone who loved her without conditions, found a version of herself she never would have met had he stayed. Was his leaving painful? Yes, but was it meaningless? No. In Jungian terms, she experienced a psychic reordering, a shaking loose of the old structure to make room for individuation, the process of becoming one's true self. Synchronicity isn't just the universe playing matchmaker or messenger. It's how your unconscious aligns with external reality to push you toward wholeness. In ancient Greek, the word kairos refers to the right or opportune moment, different from chronos, which is just linear time. Kairos is divine timing, the sacred interruption, when something happens exactly when your soul is ready, even if your ego is not. Loss often arrives in kairos, and sometimes the wisdom isn't in what we lost, but in what was removed before it could destroy us. The universe sees beyond what we can perceive. Maybe that person's presence in your future would have derailed your purpose. Maybe they were a beautiful detour, not the destination. Maybe your suffering in their absence was the only way you'd return to your path. There's also something to be said about the patterns we repeat. Jung said, "What you resist persists." Many people find themselves drawn again and again to the same kind of partner, the same kind of pain, the same emotional dead ends, until the universe sends a synchronicity strong enough to break the cycle. That breakup, that betrayal, that ghosting, it may be the moment the pattern finally cracked. You don't recognize synchronicity by how it looks. You recognize it by how it feels. There's a shift, subtle but powerful, like you've just been handed a key to a door you didn't know was locked. It might be a song playing at the exact moment you're thinking about giving up, a stranger saying a sentence that hits your chest like a truth you forgot, a dream so vivid it stays with you for days. These are not random, they're signs, not always loud, but always there for the soul willing to listen. So many people miss them, not because they're not present, but because they're too focused on what was lost to see what is being offered. Imagine you're on a train. The person sitting beside you for miles gets off at a stop. You're devastated, but the seat had to be empty for the next soul to arrive, one who will take you further, one who is going where you're truly meant to go. If you stayed grieving at that stop, you'd never reach the destination that was waiting for you. There is a sacred intelligence behind what we call coincidence. Indigenous cultures, mystics and sages have long known this. Jung just gave it a name. And when you begin to live with this awareness, every loss becomes a message, every ending, a map. Even pain becomes a kind of guidance system. It points to what still needs healing. It highlights the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. And sometimes it reminds you that you're not as alone as you think, that something bigger is watching, weaving, and waiting for the right moment to reveal what's next. Letting go hurts, but it becomes easier when you trust the design. When you realize the universe is less interested in your comfort and more interested in your evolution, it will rearrange everything to put you on the right track, even if that means breaking your heart. Especially if that means breaking your heart. Because it's often through those cracks that light enters, and where light enters, vision begins. We rarely fall in love with people. We fall in love with reflections, with stories, with the familiar feeling of something unresolved finally being seen, even if only for a moment. That magnetic pull you feel towards someone, it's not always about them. It's often about what they awaken in you. Carl Jung called this the shadow, the unconscious parts of ourselves we've rejected, suppressed, or simply never learned how to hold. Traits we deny, needs we silence, emotions we've been taught to fear. And when we meet someone, especially in romantic or emotionally intense ways, we don't just see them, we project. What you admire in another might be the potential you haven't yet claimed in yourself. What irritates you might be a trait you were punished for as a child. What devastates you when they leave is often not just about the person, but about the wound they touched. We all carry a psychological mirror, and the more unaware we are of our own shadow, the more we unconsciously assign its content to the people around us. Take, for example, the person who breaks your heart with silence. They ignore your messages, disappear without explanation. It feels like abandonment, like rejection. But beneath the surface, what is that triggering? Is it just their action, or is it resurfacing a deeper fear? Maybe it mirrors a parent who was emotionally distant. Maybe it echoes a childhood moment when you needed love, but learned you had to earn it. This is the painful beauty of emotional rupture. It forces the unconscious into the light. When someone triggers you, it doesn't always mean they're toxic. It might mean they're your mirror, a mirror for the needs you've disowned, the anger you suppress, the boundaries you've never set, the pain you've postponed for years. And this is where transformation begins. Jung wrote, "One does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." To face the shadow is to stop blaming everyone else for your pain and to ask, what part of me have I abandoned that allowed this? Not from a place of shame, but from a place of radical responsibility. There was once a man who constantly dated partners who belittled him. Each time, the relationship ended with him feeling small, unseen, ashamed. On the surface, it looked like bad luck. But in therapy, he uncovered something deeper, a childhood where love was conditional on performance. Praise only came when he achieved something. When he failed, he was criticized or ignored. His adult relationships were replays of that same script. The women he chose weren't the problem. They were actors in a story his shadow had written long ago. Only when he stopped asking, "Why do they treat me this way?" and started asking, "Why do I allow it?" did his life begin to change. This isn't about victim blaming. This is about reclaiming your power, because here's the truth. If the wound is yours, the healing can be too. When we're unaware of our shadow, we keep reliving the same relationship in different bodies. We keep thinking this time it will be different, not realizing we're still the same, still reacting from unhealed places, still choosing from fear, still speaking from pain. But when we begin to see our projections, we can choose again. We stop relating from our wounds and start relating from our wholeness. The shadow isn't just darkness. It holds your gold too, the assertiveness you never learned to embody, the sensuality you were taught to feel ashamed of, the rage you buried to be good. All of it lives in the shadow, waiting to be reclaimed. And often we envy in others what we've rejected in ourselves. That person who moves through life boldly, unapologetically. Maybe they don't intimidate you. Maybe they remind you of the part of you that's been locked away for years. So next time someone stirs something intense in you, attraction, irritation, longing, fear, pause. Don't rush to label them. Ask instead, what part of me are they shining a light on? That question, though uncomfortable, will lead you to freedom faster than any closure ever could. And here's another piece we rarely talk about. Sometimes you are the mirror for others. Your growth, your clarity, your boundaries, they may trigger those who are not ready to face their own reflection. And when that happens, don't shrink. Don't twist yourself into softness to avoid making others uncomfortable. Your light will disturb people still married to their darkness. Let it. There's a term in Jungian therapy called the golden shadow. It refers to the positive traits you suppress. Your talents, brilliance, confidence, the light you're afraid to claim. We often project our golden shadow onto others we admire excessively. Celebrities, spiritual teachers, lovers. We say things like, they're so powerful, so magnetic, so wise. But in truth, what we're really seeing is ourselves through the fog of unclaimed potential. The ones we chase are often representations of the versions of ourselves we've forgotten. So when someone leaves and you're shattered, ask yourself, was I clinging to them? or to the part of me they allowed me to access. And if it's the latter, you don't need them to keep it. You can take that part back. You can become the thing you projected. The journey through the shadow isn't linear. It's disorienting. You'll resist it, deny it, blame others before you take ownership. But eventually the pattern becomes too loud, the pain too familiar. And in that repetition, a doorway opens. Because once you've faced the shadow, once you've seen the full spectrum of who you are, both the wounds and the wonder, no one else holds power over you. You stop looking for saviors. You stop fearing rejection. You stop making people your home. And something else starts to grow in that space. Something quieter, more lasting, more real. There comes a moment, often after the tears have dried and the silence no longer stings, when you realize the person you lost wasn't the end of your story. They were a chapter, and perhaps not even the most important one. You start to feel it in subtle ways. You wake up one morning and don't check your phone for their name. A song that used to break you now plays like background music. A memory floats in, but instead of sharpness, there's softness. Space has opened, and in that space something sacred begins to rise. Purpose. Pain, when not ignored or numbed, becomes an invitation, a whisper, sometimes even a command, not to move on, but to move through, to look at the ashes of what was and ask, what am I meant to build from this? The universe doesn't waste suffering. It's not careless with your heart. If something is removed, especially something or someone you beg to keep, there is meaning in that. Maybe it was preparing you, or protecting you, or pushing you onto a path you never would have chosen willingly, but one that holds your becoming. Think of it like pruning. A gardener doesn't cut branches because they hate the tree. They cut to help it bloom. Certain relationships, patterns, and roles are trimmed from your life not to punish you, but to make room for what's next. And what's next is always aligned with who you're becoming. But here's the catch. Purpose rarely looks like what you plan. We expect clarity to arrive like a roadmap. Instead, it shows up in fragments. A new interest, a conversation that lights something in you, a sudden pull towards something unfamiliar. That's how purpose speaks, not with logic, but with resonance. You feel it before you understand it. One woman, after a crushing divorce, found herself wandering into a yoga class just to pass the time. She had never done anything spiritual in her life, but something clicked. The breathwork calmed her anxiety. The stillness quieted the grief. Months later, she became certified. A year later, she was leading trauma-informed yoga retreats. She told me, "I thought I was losing my future. Turns out, I was meeting it." That's how it works. Loss rips away the illusion of certainty. But behind that illusion is a life more honest, more aligned, and more alive. There's a concept in ancient Hebrew called tikkun. It means repair of the soul. The idea that our challenges are not random, but are directly connected to our mission in this life. What breaks you is often what you're here to help heal, not just for others, but for yourself. You don't have to be a therapist or teacher to live your purpose. Sometimes it's the energy you carry, the way you hold others, because you know what being dropped feels like. Sometimes it's the art you create, the children you raise, the kindness you offer strangers because you remember the coldness of being invisible. There is no small purpose. There is only presence and what you do with it. And here's another truth. You won't always see the purpose while the wound is still open. The insight comes in layers. Sometimes years later, you'll look back and whisper, "Oh, now I understand." And the universe will whisper back, "You were never abandoned, only guided." But even if the why isn't clear yet, the movement is, the pull forward, the gentle nudge toward becoming. You start to notice that your tolerance for certain things has changed. You can no longer pretend. You can no longer shrink to fit relationships that don't feel sacred. You begin making decisions not from fear or loneliness, but from truth. That's evolution. That's purpose. Carl Jung believed that what we call fate is often just the unconscious finally becoming conscious. The moment we start choosing with awareness, instead of reacting from wounds, is the moment we align with the deeper currents of life. And in those moments, strange things happen. People enter your life who feel like answers. Opportunities appear without effort. You start trusting your intuition more than logic. Life stops being about control and starts becoming about response. You meet life as it is, not as you wish it to be. And yet somehow it gives you more than you imagined, because when you live aligned with your essence, life responds. It synchronizes, but that alignment requires letting go of old identities, of dreams you outgrew, of relationships that no longer mirror your truth. And it's scary, because before something new can begin, the old must fully die. You stand in that space in between, no longer who you were, not yet who you'll become. That space is sacred. It's where transformation is seeded, where grief becomes wisdom, where silence becomes guidance, and where loss, that once unbearable ache, becomes the raw material for something astonishing. You start to realize nothing was ever truly lost. Not the love, not the lessons, not even the parts of yourself you thought had died in the wreckage. They were all being rearranged, refined, rewoven into a future you couldn't see, but one that was always waiting. So if you're standing in the ruins, heart still aching, soul still searching, don't rush. Don't try to rebuild too quickly. Let the silence shape you. Let the questions deepen you. Let the loss widen your capacity for joy, for presence, for purpose. Because sometimes the purpose isn't what comes next. Sometimes the purpose is the journey back to yourself. And as that journey unfolds, slowly, tenderly, with all its mess and magic, you'll look back not in bitterness, but in awe at how every twist made sense, at how every heartbreak softened you, at how everything that broke you, in truth, was breaking you open.